The fluorescent lights of Lucky Coin Laundromat buzzed softly in the midnight silence, casting a pale glow onto the empty parking lot. Well, almost empty. A single police cruiser rolled past slowly, its headlights sweeping across the building's front windows. Inside, Sheriff James Cooper caught sight of the same scene he'd witnessed every night for the past 2 weeks: a young girl, probably around 12, sitting patiently in front of washing machine number 7. She was there again tonight, just like clockwork. Her small frame perched on the edge of a plastic chair, one leg tucked underneath her, while the other swung gently back and forth. Her school backpack, worn at the edges but carefully patched, sat beside her like a faithful companion. The sheriff couldn't help but notice how she arranged her supplies with careful precision on the folding table: a nearly empty bottle of detergent, a plastic bag full of quarters, and what looked like homework spread out before her. Something about the scene made his heart heavy. It wasn't right for a child to be doing laundry alone at this hour, but there was nothing technically wrong happening. No laws being broken, no immediate danger. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Tonight, he noticed she was wearing a purple hoodie that seemed a size too big, probably a hand-me-down. Her hair was neatly braided, though a few strands had escaped and curled around her face in the laundromat's humidity. Despite the late hour, she maintained perfect posture, her eyes focused on what appeared to be a math textbook while she waited for the wash cycle to finish. Cooper had been sheriff of Mill Creek for 15 years, and he prided himself on knowing most folks in town. But this girl and her midnight laundry routine were mysteries to him. He'd seen her carefully count out quarters from her plastic bag, always just enough for one load. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her shoulders would slump with exhaustion, but the moment the door chimed with another customer, she'd straighten up, pulling dignity around herself like a protective shield. The other regular night owls at the laundromat, the college student pulling all-nighters, the nurse washing scrubs between shifts, they'd started to notice her too. They'd give her small nods of acknowledgement or slight waves, which she'd return with a polite smile that seemed too mature for her young face. But no one ever approached her, as if they all sensed she was carrying a burden that made her unapproachable. From his patrol car, Cooper watched as she methodically sorted clothes into the washing machine. Even from a distance, he could see how she treated each item with care, checking pockets and testing for stains before adding them to the load. Her movements were practiced, efficient. This wasn't new to her. The way she stretched to reach the soap dispenser made it clear just how young she really was, having to stand on tiptoes to pour in the detergent. Sometimes, during his patrols, he'd see her pull out a small notebook, writing in it between checking the machine's timer. He wondered if she was keeping track of expenses, doing homework, or maybe writing about her life. Whatever it was, she guarded it carefully, closing it whenever anyone walked too close. The sight of her there affected him more than he cared to admit. In all his years of law enforcement, he'd learned that some situations required more than just enforcing the law. They required understanding, patience, and sometimes intervention. But he had to be careful. He couldn't just march in and demand answers. That would likely scare her away or make things worse. What troubled him most was how alone she seemed. Not just physically alone in the laundromat, but carrying a kind of solitude that no child should have to bear. The few times their eyes had met through the window, he'd seen a flicker of something, not fear or defiance, but a quiet determination that spoke of responsibilities beyond her years. Cooper began timing his patrols to coincide with her laundry sessions, not obviously watching but keeping a protective eye out. He noticed she always finished by 1 a.m., carefully folding each item before packing up her supplies. Then she'd disappear into the night, walking quickly but confidently, her backpack and fresh laundry bag creating a silhouette that seemed too small for such responsibility. As he drove past the laundromat one more time that night, Cooper made a decision. Tomorrow, he would find a way to reach out, to understand why this young girl spent her nights alone among the washers and dryers. There had to be a story here, and something told him it was one that needed to be heard, and maybe one where he could help make a difference. The buzzing fluorescent lights continued their steady hum as another midnight shift at Lucky Coin Laundromat drew to a close, but for Sheriff Cooper, this was just the beginning of a mystery that would change not only his life, but the entire community of Mill Creek. Sheriff Cooper couldn't get the image of the young girl out of his mind. Over the next 2 weeks, his concern grew deeper with each passing night. He noticed how she'd started bringing a small pillow from home, tucking it behind her back in those hard plastic chairs while she waited. The sight of it made his chest tight. She was preparing for these long nights, making them routine. The more he watched, the more details jumped out at him. Her shoes, though clean, were wearing thin at the soles. She'd developed a system for everything, quarters arranged in neat little stacks of 4, each load precisely measured with the same blue plastic cup she brought from home. She never wasted a single thing, stretching that nearly empty detergent bottle by adding just a little water to get every last drop. One particularly quiet Tuesday night, Cooper parked his patrol car across the street, paperwork spread across his passenger seat as an excuse to linger. Through the large windows, he watched her sort through a basket of clothes. Her movements told a story he wasn't sure he wanted to read. The way she carefully checked each item for tears, her small fingers working quickly with a travel sewing kit when she found them. No child should be this practiced at mending clothes. The regular customers had started leaving little things for her, nothing obvious or charity-like that might hurt her pride. The college student who came in on Wednesdays would accidentally leave behind a fresh dryer sheet box. The night nurse began bringing extra granola bars, casually offering them around to everyone in the laundromat. The girl would accept these small kindnesses with a dignity that made Cooper's heart ache. There was something about her eyes that haunted him most. They weren't sad exactly, but they carried a weight he recognized from his years on the force, the look of someone carrying responsibilities far too heavy for their shoulders. Yet somehow she maintained this incredible grace about it all. When the washing machine would finally stop, she'd fold each item with such care, smoothing out wrinkles with her small hands as if each piece of clothing was precious. Some nights, when the laundromat was particularly quiet, he'd hear her humming softly to herself. It was always the same tune, something gentle and familiar that he couldn't quite place. She'd catch herself sometimes, looking around quickly to see if anyone noticed, then return to her methodical work. These little moments of childhood breaking through made her situation feel even more wrong. The weather was getting colder now, and Cooper noticed she'd started wearing the same thin jacket every night. It wasn't nearly enough for the dropping temperatures, but she never complained. Instead, she'd sit closer to the dryers, soaking up their warmth while pretending to read her book. Her homework was always spread out on the table, but Cooper noticed she spent more time staring at the washing machine than at her studies, exhaustion clearly taking its toll. One night, she almost fell asleep waiting for the dryer to finish. Her head nodded forward, then snapped back up quickly, eyes wide with alarm. She immediately grabbed her backpack, pulled out a water bottle, and took a long drink. The way she fought against her tiredness spoke of responsibility, of promises kept, of someone depending on her. Cooper wondered about her family, about what circumstances had led to this young girl taking on such adult duties. The other officers had started noticing his increased patrols around the laundromat. His partner even teased him about becoming overly invested in the cleanliness of his uniform. But Cooper couldn't explain it to them, how this silent vigil had become important to him, how each night he hoped to find her absent, safely at home in bed where a child should be, and how each night his concern grew when he found her there again. He'd started keeping a log of sorts, noting patterns and details. The load sizes were always the same, enough for 3 or 4 people's clothes. Sometimes there were school uniforms in the mix, smaller ones that couldn't be hers. She handled these with extra care, as if they belonged to someone precious to her. The way she checked each button, smoothed each collar, these weren't just clothes to her, they were a responsibility. The plastic bag of quarters was getting lighter. Cooper could tell by the way she counted them more carefully now, sometimes twice before starting a load. Once, he saw her skip the fabric softener entirely, carefully returning those quarters to her bag. The sight of such careful budgeting from someone so young made him realize he couldn't just observe anymore. Something needed to change. As another night drew to a close, Cooper watched her gather her things with the same quiet efficiency she showed in everything. She tucked her homework away, zipped up her worn backpack, and hoisted the freshly cleaned laundry bag over her shoulder. The weight of it made her adjust her stance, but she never stumbled. As she pushed open the door into the cold night air, Cooper made up his mind. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would find a way to help, not as a sheriff, but as a human being who couldn't stand by and watch a child shoulder adult burdens alone anymore. The night was unusually cold for Mill Creek, frost already forming on the laundromat windows despite it being only midnight. Sheriff Cooper sat in his patrol car, fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. After weeks of watching and worrying, he knew it was time to make his move, but he needed to do it right. One wrong step and he might scare her away forever. He waited until she'd started her usual load of laundry before making his decision. Grabbing his coat, he stepped out into the biting cold. The bell above the laundromat door chimed as he entered, and he immediately noticed how she tensed up, her small frame becoming absolutely still. Her eyes darted toward the exit, calculating, just as he'd expected they would. Cooper deliberately moved slowly, making his footsteps heavy enough to be heard. He didn't walk directly toward her, instead moving to the vending machine in the corner. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he fed dollar bills into the machine, carefully selecting 2 hot chocolates. The machine whirred and clunked, the sound echoing in the quiet space. "Gets pretty cold in here at night," he said to no one in particular, his voice gentle and conversational. He could see her reflection in the vending machine's glass front, watching him cautiously. "Thought some hot chocolate might help. Would you like one?" He held out the second cup, still not looking directly at her. From the corner of his eye, he saw her weighing the situation, her hands clutching the strap of her backpack. The washing machine tumbled behind her, providing a steady background rhythm to the tense moment. "My mom says I shouldn't take things from strangers," she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. There was a maturity in her tone that didn't match her young face. Cooper nodded, smiling slightly. "Your mom sounds very wise." "I'm Sheriff Cooper. I did the night patrol around here." He pulled out his badge, setting it on the folding table between them along with the hot chocolate. "Now we're not strangers anymore, but you still don't have to take it if you don't want to." She studied the badge for a long moment, then reached for the cup with careful movements. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm Maya." The sheriff settled into a plastic chair, leaving plenty of space between them. He noticed how she relaxed slightly when he didn't sit too close. The hot chocolate seemed to help too, her small hands wrapped around the warm cup, soaking in its heat. "That's a pretty name," he said. "You know, Maya, I've been doing this route for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone as dedicated to their laundry as you are." His tone was light, but his eyes were kind, watching how she processed his words. Maya took a small sip of her hot chocolate before responding. "The machines in our building don't work," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been broken for months." Cooper nodded, letting the silence stretch comfortably. Sometimes, he knew, silence could build more trust than words. The washing machine clicked into its final spin cycle, its steady whirring filling the quiet space between them. After a few minutes, Maya spoke again, surprising him. "My mom works nights," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "She has 3 jobs. She's really tired when she gets home, so I do the laundry." There was pride in her voice, mixed with something that sounded like worry. "That's very thoughtful of you," Cooper said carefully. "Must be hard, being here so late every night." Maya shrugged, but he could see the weight of responsibility in her shoulders. "My little brother and sister need clean uniforms for school, and Mom needs her work clothes." She straightened up a bit. "I can handle it." The washing machine buzzed, making them both jump slightly. Maya stood up, moving to transfer the clothes to the dryer. Cooper watched as she carefully counted out her quarters, noting how few remained in her plastic bag. "You know," he said, keeping his voice casual, "my wife used to work nights too, when our kids were little. It's tough on a family." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Sometimes people want to help, but they don't know how." Maya's hands stilled on the dryer door. "We're okay," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Mom says we just have to hold on until things get better." Cooper nodded, understanding the pride and determination in her words. "Your mom sounds like a strong woman. Must be where you get it from." He saw a small smile touch her lips at that. "She is," Maya said, shutting the dryer door and pressing start. "She works really hard. I just wish." She trailed off, looking down at her worn shoes. "What do you wish, Maya?" Cooper asked gently. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice that reminded him just how young she really was, she said, I wish she didn't have to work so hard. I wish I could help more." The words hung in the air, heavy with love and worry and responsibility far beyond her years. Cooper felt something shift in that moment, a door opening, a wall coming down just enough to let him help. This wasn't just about broken washing machines anymore. This was about a family struggling to hold themselves together, about a young girl trying to lift burdens that should never have been hers to carry. As the dryer hummed behind them, Cooper began to form a plan. The community of Mill Creek had always taken care of its own. They just needed to know where help was needed. Looking at Maya's tired but determined face, he knew that help had to be offered in just the right way, with respect for their pride and acknowledgement of their strength. "Maya," he said softly, "would you tell me more about your family?" The truth came out slowly that night, like water dripping from a barely open faucet. As Maya's clothes tumbled in the dryer, she began sharing pieces of her family's story, each detail making Sheriff Cooper's heart grow heavier. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating a cocoon of quiet around their conversation in the empty laundromat. "Dad got sick last year," Maya said, her fingers absently tracing patterns on her empty hot chocolate cup. "He was a truck driver. Mom says he tried to hide it at first, kept working even when he didn't feel good." She paused, swallowing hard. "He didn't want us to worry." Cooper noticed how she spoke about her father in the past tense, but he waited, letting her tell the story at her own pace. The dryer's rhythmic tumbling filled the silence between her words. When he finally went to the doctor, it was too late. Maya's voice grew quieter. "Mom says he fought hard, but sometimes even fighting isn't enough." She looked up at Cooper, her eyes showing a wisdom far beyond her 12 years. "He passed away 3 months ago." The sheriff felt his throat tighten. He'd seen death notices in the paper, but he hadn't connected them to the young girl in the laundromat. Now, watching her small shoulders carry such enormous grief, he understood so much more. After the funeral, everything changed. Maya continued, her voice steady despite the pain in her words. "The medical bills were really big. Mom had to sell our car. She started taking extra shifts at the diner, then got a cleaning job at the office buildings downtown. Now she works at the gas station too." Cooper did the math in his head, 3 jobs, barely any rest between them. No wonder Maya was doing laundry at midnight. Her mother probably hadn't sat down for a proper meal in months. "My brother's only 7 and my sister's 5, Maya explained, straightening up like a tiny adult. "They need someone to help them get ready for school in the morning. Mom gets home from the gas station at 3 a.m. and she has to be at the diner by 9. She's so tired sometimes she falls asleep in her uniform." The dryer buzzed, making them both jump slightly. Maya stood up, moving to retrieve her clothes with practiced efficiency. As she folded each item, Cooper noticed how she handled the smaller pieces, her siblings' clothes, with extra care, smoothing out every wrinkle. "The washing machine in our building broke down about 2 months ago," she said, carefully stacking tiny t-shirts and school uniforms. "Mom kept asking the landlord to fix it, but he always says he's waiting for parts. She was taking everything to the laundromat herself at first, but I could see how exhausted she was." Maya's hands moved automatically, folding and sorting. "One night, I found her crying over the laundry basket. She thought I was asleep. That's when I decided I could help. I'm old enough to handle the laundry, and this place is safe. The night nurse always watches out for me, and there's a security camera." Cooper thought about all the nights he'd driven past, seeing her through the window. She planned it all so carefully, picking the safest time, when the regular night workers would be around, positioning herself where she could be seen by the cameras. "Mom didn't want to let me do it at first," Maya added, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "But I showed her I could be responsible. I made a budget with the quarters, figured out how to make the detergent last longer. She checks on me during her break at the gas station, calling the payphone over there." She pointed to the old payphone on the wall, its handset slightly cleaner than the rest of it from regular use. The story spilled out faster now, as if Maya was relieved to finally share it with someone. She told him about helping her siblings with homework, about making sure they ate breakfast even when there wasn't much in the kitchen, about reading them bedtime stories just like their dad used to do. "The hardest part is when they ask when things will get better," Maya admitted, her voice finally betraying a tremor. "Mom's trying so hard, but everything's so expensive. Last week, my sister needed new shoes for school, and I saw Mum skip lunch for 3 days to say got for them. Cooper watched as she zipped up her backpack, now fuller with clean clothes. The weight of her family's struggle was written in every careful movement, every penny-pinching decision, every responsibility shouldered by shoulders too young for such burdens. You know what's funny? Maya said, though her smile held no humor. Sometimes I come here early, just to sit in the warmth for a while. Our heating doesn't work very well, and Mum says we have to be careful with the electric bill. But here, with the dryers running, it's always warm. The sheriff felt something shift in his chest, a decision crystallizing. This wasn't just about a broken washing machine anymore. This was about a family drowning in circumstances beyond their control, about a mother working herself to exhaustion, about children growing up too fast in the face of loss and hardship. Maya checked her watch. A child's digital timepiece with a worn band. I should get going, she said. Mum will call soon to check on me, and I need to get these clothes home before she finishes her shift. As she gathered her things, Cooper realized this was more than just another sad story he'd encountered on the job. This was a chance to show what community really meant, to prove that Mill Creek could be more than just a place on a map. It could be a lifeline for a family fighting to stay afloat. Looking at Maya's tired but determined face, Cooper knew what he had to do next. The question wasn't whether to help anymore, but how to do it in a way that would preserve this family's dignity while lifting some of the crushing weight from their shoulders. Sheriff Cooper couldn't sleep that night after his conversation with Maya. He lay awake, thinking about a little girl doing laundry at midnight, a mother working 3 jobs, and 2 younger siblings waiting at home. By sunrise, he had a plan. It wasn't just about fixing a washing machine anymore. It was about lifting up an entire family. His first stop that morning was Pete's Appliance Repair on Main Street. The bell jingled as he pushed open the door, and the smell of coffee and motor oil filled the air. Pete looked up from behind the counter, his hands covered in grease from the toaster he was fixing. "Well, if it isn't my old classmate from Mill Creek High," Pete said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What brings you here so early, Sheriff?" Cooper settled against the counter, taking off his hat. "Remember when your mom passed away, Pete? How the whole town showed up with casseroles and helping hands." Pete's face softened at the memory. "Sure do. Couldn't have made it through without everyone's support." "Well, I've got a family that needs that kind of help now," Cooper said, and began telling Maya's story. He watched Pete's expression change as he described the broken washing machine, the midnight laundry sessions, the mother working 3 jobs to keep her children fed. Before Cooper even finished, Pete was reaching for his tools. "Give me the address," he said firmly. "No child should be doing laundry at midnight because of a broken machine I can fix." That was just the beginning. Cooper's next stop was the First Street Church, where morning Bible study was just letting out. Mrs. Chen, who'd run the church's outreach program for 20 years, listened intently as Cooper shared what he'd learned about the family's situation. 3 jobs? Mrs. Chen shook her head, already pulling out her planning notebook. "No wonder that poor girl's doing laundry at night. We can help, Sheriff. We've got a whole network of people who'd be happy to pitch in." The church group sprang into action with quiet efficiency. They organized a meal train, arranged after-school care for the younger children, and put together a list of members with job connections who might help the mother find better-paying work with more reasonable hours. Word spread through town like a gentle wave. The owner of the local diner, where Maya's mother worked morning shifts, offered to provide free meals for the children. The principal at the elementary school quietly arranged for the younger siblings to join the free breakfast and lunch programs. By afternoon, Cooper found himself in the office of Bill Thompson, head of the Mill Creek Business Association. Bill had known Cooper since they were kids playing baseball in the town league. A single mother working 3 jobs to support 3 kids. Bill leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "That's not right, especially not here in Mill Creek. Let me make some calls." The Business Association started a discreet fundraiser, reaching out to local shops and companies. They called it the Mill Creek Family Fund, keeping the family's name private while gathering support. The response was immediate and heartfelt. The local grocery store donated a month's worth of food. The hardware store offered to help with home repairs. The dentist volunteered free checkups for the kids. Each offer came with the same message. We take care of our own in Mill Creek. Cooper stopped by the laundromat that evening, speaking with the owner, Mr. Patel. After hearing the story, Mr. Patel didn't hesitate. No more quarters needed, he said firmly. That family has a free account here until their machine is fixed. And tell the mother, my wife is looking for help managing the store. One job, decent pay, regular hours. The night nurse who'd been watching over Maya spoke up too, mentioning that her hospital was hiring administrative staff with full benefits. Better hours, better pay, and health insurance for the whole family. Back at the station, Cooper's fellow officers got involved. They organized a collection among themselves, gathering gift cards for school supplies and winter clothes. Officer Rodriguez's wife, a career counselor, offered to help Maya's mother update her resume and prepare for interviews. The high school guidance counselor heard about Maya and arranged for her to join the after-school homework club, where she could study in a warm, safe place instead of the laundromat. The librarian set aside books for the younger siblings, creating special reading packages delivered weekly. What amazed Cooper most was how naturally it all came together. Nobody needed convincing, they just needed to know there was a need. The people of Mill Creek stepped up not with pity, but with understanding and respect. They remembered their own hard times, the moments when community support had made all the difference. A local handyman volunteered to check the family's heating system before winter set in. A retired teacher offered free tutoring. The owner of the coffee shop started setting aside day-old pastries for the kids' breakfasts. Each gesture was small on its own, but together they were weaving a safety net for a family that had been falling for too long. Pete called that evening with news about the washing machine. It's not just the washer, he reported. The whole laundry room needs updating. But don't worry. I've got some buddies in the trade who owe me favors. We'll have it running better than new by the weekend. Cooper sat in his patrol car that night, looking at the list of people who'd stepped up to help. It had grown from a single page to 3, filled with names and offers of support. This wasn't charity. It was community in its purest form, neighbors helping neighbors through hard times. As he watched the sun set over Mill Creek, Cooper thought about Maya and her family. Soon, she wouldn't need to spend her nights in the laundromat. Soon, her mother wouldn't have to work herself to exhaustion just to keep food on the table. Soon, this family would know they weren't alone anymore. The real miracle, Cooper realized, wasn't just in the help being offered, it was in how it would be given, with dignity, with respect. With the understanding that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who need help the most. Mill Creek was about to show what it meant to be more than just a town. It was about to become a lifeline. The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the windows of the diner when Sheriff Cooper walked in. It was earlier than he usually started his day, but he knew this was when Maya's mother, Patricia, would be finishing her morning shift. His heart was beating a little faster than usual. Breaking news to people was always delicate, even when it was good news. He spotted her immediately, refilling coffee cups with practiced efficiency. Her uniform was pressed despite its age, her hair neat, though her eyes showed the exhaustion of someone who hadn't truly rested in months. Cooper could see where Maya got her dignity from. Even bone-tired, Patricia carried herself with quiet grace. "More coffee, Sheriff?" she asked as she approached his booth, managing a small but genuine smile. Her voice was soft but steady, the kind that could soothe children to sleep after a long day. "Actually," Cooper said gently, "I was hoping we could talk for a minute, when you have time." Something flickered across Patricia's face, that look parents get when they're worried about their children. "Is this about Maya?" she asked, her knuckles whitening slightly on the coffee pot. "I know it's not ideal, her being at the laundromat late, but I check on her every night and—" "Maya's fine," Cooper assured her quickly. "She's more than fine. She's an extraordinary young lady. Would you sit with me for a moment?" Patricia glanced at the clock, then at her nearly empty section. The morning rush wouldn't start for another hour. Slowly, she slid into the booth across from him. "Your daughter told me about your husband," Cooper said softly. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Patricia's hands twisted the edge of her apron. "Thank you," she whispered. "We're managing. The children. They're so strong. Especially Maya. Sometimes I think she's trying to be too strong, but—" "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about," Cooper said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "The community has noticed your family's strength, and they want to help." As Cooper began explaining everything, the repairs being organized, the job opportunities, the support network being formed, Patricia sat very still. Her eyes grew wider, and then, to Cooper's gentle heartbreak, they began to fill with tears. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "Why would everyone we haven't asked for?" "You didn't have to ask," Cooper said softly. "That's what community means. We look out for each other. Maya's midnight laundry sessions, they touched a lot of hearts, made people remember times when they needed help themselves." Patricia's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the table to steady them. "I've been trying so hard," she whispered, and the dam finally broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks as months of exhaustion, worry, and grief poured out. Working all these jobs, trying to keep the children from feeling the loss too deeply. Maya, she's had to grow up so fast. I see her trying to be the strong one, trying to help with her siblings, doing the laundry at night so I can rest, and it breaks my heart. She's just a little girl. She should be playing with friends, not. Her voice cracked, and Cooper quietly passed her a napkin. The early morning sun painted streaks across the diner's worn linoleum floor as Patricia wiped her eyes. "I didn't want to ask for help," she continued, straightening her shoulders. "After Tom passed, everyone was so kind at first, but you can't lean on people forever. I thought if I just worked hard enough, took enough shifts." "You've done more than enough," Cooper said firmly. "Nobody's offering charity here. This is neighbors helping neighbors. The Business Association wants to create a fund to help families going through tough times. Your story inspired that." The church group was already looking for ways to support working parents. "Mr. Patel at the laundromat? He's been wanting to start a training program for new managers." Patricia listened as Cooper laid out all the opportunities, all the doors that were opening. Her tears had slowed, but they took on a different quality, not of sorrow now, but of relief, of hope. "The hardest part of watching Maya at night," she admitted, "wasn't just knowing she was doing adult work. It was feeling like I'd failed her somehow, like I wasn't being the mother she deserved." "Failed her?" Cooper shook his head. "Ma'am, that girl is who she is because of you. Her strength, her dignity, her care for others, she learned that from watching you. But even the strongest people need rest sometimes." Patricia looked down at the folder Cooper had placed between them. "I don't know how to accept all this," she whispered. "How to thank everyone." "You accept it by letting your daughter be a child again," Cooper said gently. "By taking care of yourself so you can be there for your family. By remembering that strength isn't just about carrying burdens alone. Sometimes it's about letting others help carry them with you." The morning light had grown stronger now, warming the diner's windows. Patricia reached for the folder with trembling fingers, and as she opened it, Cooper saw something spark in her eyes, something that had been missing before. Hope, not just for survival anymore, but for a real chance at a better life. "My babies," she whispered, touching the papers that detailed the after-school programs, the tutoring offers, the job opportunities. They could have a real childhood again. Cooper watched as she read through everything, saw the moment when she truly understood that this wasn't a handout but a hand up. The proud set of her shoulders didn't diminish. If anything, it grew stronger with the knowledge that her community saw her family's worth and wanted to invest in their future. "Tom would have loved this town," she said finally, looking up at Cooper with eyes that were tired but no longer desperate. "He always said community was what made America special." He was right, Cooper smiled. "And you're part of our community. You and your children, you matter to Mill Creek. Let us show you how much." 3 months had passed since that early morning conversation in the diner, and Mill Creek was showing its true colors in ways that touched everyone's hearts. The transformation in Maya's family wasn't just about fixed washing machines or new jobs, it was about restored hope and renewed spirits. The old laundromat stood quiet at midnight now, its fluorescent lights no longer keeping watch over a young girl's midnight duties. Instead, Maya was usually fast asleep by that hour, her homework finished in the warmth of the after-school program, her evenings free for the simple joys of being 12 years old. The biggest change was visible in their home. The apartment building's laundry room had been completely renovated, thanks to Pete and his network of skilled workers. The washing machines now hummed efficiently, and a fresh coat of paint brightened the walls. A small plaque hung beside the entrance. "Community Care's Laundry Room," a reminder that no family should have to struggle alone. Patricia had taken the job at the hospital, where regular hours and full benefits meant she could finally breathe easier. Her face had lost that perpetual look of exhaustion, replaced by a quiet contentment. She worked one job now instead of three, which meant she could be home for dinner with her children, something that had seemed like an impossible luxury just months ago. The younger children were blossoming too. Maya's little brother had joined the school's science club, his eyes lighting up with excitement when he talked about experiments and discoveries. The youngest, now in kindergarten, had made fast friends with the daughter of one of the church group members, their playful giggles filling the apartment that had been too quiet for too long. But perhaps the most beautiful transformation was in Maya herself. Sheriff Cooper still remembered the first time he saw her just being a kid again. He'd been driving past the park when he spotted her on the swings, her hair flying in the wind as she pumped her legs toward the sky. The sight had made him pull over, just to watch for a moment. Her laughter, free, unrestrained, purely childlike, had brought tears to his eyes. The community's support hadn't stopped with the initial help. It had evolved into something sustainable, something that strengthened everyone involved. The Business Association's family fund had grown, helping other families in need. Patricia had become an advocate herself, sharing her story with others who were struggling, showing them that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but a step toward healing. One particularly special evening, Cooper stopped by their apartment to check in, as he often did now. The scene that greeted him was worth every effort the town had made. The apartment was warm and bright, filled with the smell of home-cooked dinner. Maya sat at the kitchen table, working on her science project while her siblings colored nearby. Patricia moved around the kitchen with easy grace, no longer bearing the weight of impossible burdens. "Sheriff!" Maya's face lit up when she saw him. "Look what I made." She proudly held up her science project, a model of the solar system that had earned her first place in the school fair. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that only comes from having the freedom to pursue your passions. "That's incredible," Cooper smiled, meaning it. He remembered the girl from the laundromat, how she'd tried to study while fighting exhaustion. Now here she was, thriving, her natural intelligence finally having the chance to shine. Patricia invited him to stay for dinner, something that had become a weekly tradition. As they sat around the table, Cooper watched the family interact. The easy conversation, the gentle teasing, the simple joy of being together. The younger children shared stories from school, no longer shadowed by worry about their sister or their mother. "You know what's funny?" Maya said during dinner, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "I actually kind of miss the laundromat sometimes. Not the late nights," she added quickly, "but the people there were so nice." "Well," Cooper chuckled, "Mr. Patel asks about you every time I stop in. Says the place isn't the same without its midnight manager." Patricia reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You were so brave," she said softly. "But I'm happier seeing you this way, being a kid, having fun, getting to dream about your future." After dinner, as Cooper prepared to leave, he noticed something new on their wall, a family photo, recently taken at the town's Harvest Festival. They were all smiling, real smiles that reached their eyes. Behind them, the autumn leaves of Mill Creek painted a perfect backdrop, as if nature itself was celebrating their renewal. "You know," Patricia said, walking him to the door, "Tom would have loved seeing the town come together like this. He always said Mill Creek was special." "It is special," Cooper agreed. "But it's families like yours that make it that way. Your strength-inspired people. Your grace in accepting help showed others that it's okay to lean on your community sometimes." As he drove home that night, Cooper passed the laundromat. The lights were still on, but instead of a lonely child doing midnight laundry, he saw normal evening customers. College students, night shift workers, regular folks going about their lives. The sight made him smile, knowing that somewhere across town, Maya was probably getting ready for bed, her biggest worry being whether she'd finished all her homework. The stars shone brightly over Mill Creek that night, as they did every night. But to Cooper, they seemed to shine with special significance now. They reminded him of Maya's solar system project, of dreams restored, of childhood reclaimed. They reminded him that sometimes the darkest nights could lead to the brightest dawns, especially in a town where people looked out for each other. Mill Creek had always been a dot on the map, a small town like any other. But now it was something more. A testament to what community really means, a place where midnight laundry sessions could turn into morning miracles, where one family's struggle could spark a movement of kindness that would ripple out to touch countless lives. And somewhere in town, in a warm apartment with working heat and a fully functional washing machine, a young girl slept peacefully, no longer bearing adult burdens on her young shoulders. Maya's story had changed, but more importantly, it had helped change the heart of an entire town.